Tyus Jones coming back to the Memphis Grizzlies was on the table over the weekend. I don't buy that for a second. I do buy that Santi Aldama is balling in France, and I also buy that Morant is a Hall of Famer, at least at the college level. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. We are so happy to be back with you. Damichael and I back together. The dynamic duo rides once more. We had a nice little 3-day weekend, and we're back bigger and better than ever here with another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube. Obviously, YouTube continues to be a great place for us in terms of folks taking in the show. But remember, whether you're on a run, in your car, on the go, whatever the case might be, bring Damichael and I along with you. Far more friendly to the eardrums and a far more legal thing to do to listen as opposed to watching while you drive. Keep those eyes on the road and let your ears do the listening to an audio edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're subscribing on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, as well as YouTube. Damichael, I hope you had a great long weekend. The Grizzlies, there was some relevant stuff going on, so it makes for an easier Monday episode to plan. And we'll start our week off with Morant getting his flowers at his alma mater. Well-deserved. Obviously had an amazing college career, helped bring his school up to levels that they had never experienced before, at least not quite to the stratosphere of one Morant. And they gave him his respect in the form of a Hall of Fame induction on over the past weekend.
Yeah, it was cool to see, Ja getting recognized for what he did in, just a couple years, at Murray State. And I followed Murray State a little bit over the past few years because of two of the guys who were actually, at the same ceremony. Isaiah Cannon, who actually had a, brief NBA career, had a real nasty NBA injury, at one point, but, was a terrific point guard at Murray State and led them to some big things as well in OVC. And then Cameron Payne, a Memphis native, a guy who's local, someone I've been watching playing basketball for a while, did the same thing, became a first-round pick, actually, out of Murray State. And then Ja followed those two guys' footsteps and pretty much, surpassed them. And that was saying a lot, considering what Isaiah Cannon, considering what Cam Payne both did, at Murray State, and then what they went on to do to kind of justify, their statuses with their pro careers as well. But, it's just another check mark point for Morant. I know he said this is probably the biggest achievement, in his career to date. One thing, about Ja, that each step of his journey is very meaningful to him. Like he does not hide that at all, whether it's growing up in South Carolina, whether it's Augusta, Georgia, whether it's being here in Memphis and college at Murray State. Even some people will look at Murray State and say, oh, he was there a couple years, just breezed on by. But no, actually, Murray State is a very big part of his life. He has it tatted on him. And this is a great accomplishment for Ja. Probably won't be the last time he gets some Hall of Fame introductions, but it's definitely an important milestone. Still feels like kind of early in his career. Like Ja's entering, I think, year 6, and he's already a Hall of Famer, at least at the collegiate level.
Well deserved, though, of course. And I'll always remember, I think it was Florida State. I remember his performance, not necessarily the opponent. I'm pretty sure it was Florida State that they knocked off in the first round.
Marquette.
Marquette, there you go. See, that's why you correct yourself. So Marquette is who they knocked off, but they did a really good job hyping him up. There was a huge dunk that he had that was on all the highlight reels. And, I remember knowing who Morant was before he was linked to the Memphis Grizzlies. And that's a testament to how big of a star he truly was there at Murray State. I always love the comparisons to other mid-major guards, right? Like Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum. Obviously, different skill sets, different ways of achieving and succeeding, but they all seem to have similar mental makeups, right? And Ja's story is always so fascinating to me, how he was found in a side gym at an AAU tournament. And, he is really the poster child for the type that the Memphis Grizzlies have. They are looking for guys that have kind of had to grind. They're self-motivated. They're intrinsically driven. They are looking for success, and they're addicted to it in a positive way. Ja has had a rough year and a half or so. We don't need to belabor that point any further. I think it was really nice to see him be acknowledged for the good things that he does in that community. He's given back to Murray State time and time and again. And it's also really cool to see how happy he is. He seems to genuinely, to your point a moment ago, he seems to be genuinely enjoying it. And I'm sure that if this honor had happened to him 18 months ago, he would have been in the right headspace to enjoy it. So all journeys have some form of purpose or reason. Maybe this is a good time for him to kind of be reminded of exactly who he is going into a pretty significant season for his team and for him personally.
Yeah, in a way, you feel like he's needed a couple of those pat on the backs to kind of reaffirm himself of who he is, what he means. Like I said, going back to the camp he held in Memphis, he just had another one in Murray State this past weekend as well. But I remember at the Memphis camp, it was over, I think, 600 kids, and Ja was surprised. Like, what? Like, genuinely surprised. And we're like, why are you surprised? You're the superstar point guard in Memphis. Like, people love Ja Morant. But again, it's good, whether it's the Hall of Fame induction, the camp he had in Murray, it was, which I heard was a big turnout as well. It's good for him to get those kind of be reaffirmed in a way that, hey, Ja, we still believe in you. But I was just thinking out loud to a previous point that you were making as well about the mid-major point guards. And I've always thought this about Ja Morant, because when you look at those mid-major point guards, a lot of them, like the Damian Lillards, the CJ McCollums, or whatever the case may be, they're usually these undersized guys that have to skillfully shoot their ways to the NBA and whatnot. Ja is similar to them in the way that, he came up through, like an OVC school or whatever the case may be. But Ja, to me, is an anomaly, because the NBA athletes like Ja Morant don't go, hidden like that, for lack of better words. Like, Ja's athletic makeup is that of a 5-star recruit. Like, you just don't see, think of Derrick Rose, John Wall, Russell Westbrook. Those are the point guards that we think of, right? When we talk about the explosiveness in the 21st century, we say Derrick Rose, John Wall, Russell Westbrook, and we throw Ja Morant's name in that conversation because he's the youngest, of that group. But all those dudes were high major recruits. John Wall and Derrick Rose were one and done. Russell Westbrook ended up being a top 5 pick. So all of those, he's an anomaly from that way. Like, it kind of blows my mind how a guy goes to Murray State and ends up, this point guard who's dunking all over dudes with a 40-inch plus vertical at 6'3". And, there's more to the story there. They talk about how he was very frail and how he had a late growth spurt. I remember specifically I was talking to Nick Claxton. That's who it was. I was talking to Nick Claxton, the Nets center who played AAU basketball with Ja. And we were talking about Ja then. He was like, he had the passing skills and all that, but he wasn't leaping like he is now. So when you think of these guys, you think of Damian Lillard going to play multiple years at a Weber State, or CJ McCollum, doing what he did, and so many other smaller guards kind of averaging 25, 26 points a game, at these smaller schools. Ja just was more explosive than anyone else in the country, like the John Walls, the Derrick Rose, and those type of guys of the past. So he is more of an anomaly, Joe. I mean, I hesitate to say we won't see someone like that again, because history says that we will. But his journey is just very unusual. Like, you get late growth spurts, but the athleticism leap as well as the growth spurt, it's kind of weird.
Anthony Davis is another good example of that late growth spurt, right? He grew at 8 inches or something absurd in a year.
He was a point.
Right. He played guard, and that explains a lot of the ball handling and guard skills that Davis still has to this day. I'm curious about how the recruiting process went for Ja. Obviously, we know a little bit about it, but just the need for him to kind of prove himself and the need for him to be in a position where he could happily say, I made this place better. I continue to make it better. That back padding kind of situation. He's been beaten down a lot. In sometimes the criticism has been fair and other times it hasn't been. For him to get that, that positive energy from people that legitimately love and care about him, that aren't his family, right? And that's a really important piece of this that I know you know better than anybody, Damichael. That family unit is very tight.
Yep.
Getting it beyond that, right? It's a different kind of feeling. And I think that that's going to be really big for him. And I'm very happy for Ja. So congratulations to Ja Morant on the Murray State Hall of Fame induction. Let Damichael and I know how you're feeling about it. If you remember the big dunk that I'm thinking of, he jumped over some poor big dude. Just a lot of early memories of Ja Morant came flooding back over the weekend. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, the Olympics, of course, are going on as we speak. Santi Aldama is a Grizzly playing in the Olympics, and I kind of wish FIBA Santi Aldama would come home from Europe and leave NBA Santi Aldama in the past. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. Major League Baseball is approaching its trade deadline. All sorts of folks on the move. The Atlanta Braves are Damichael's team. The Washington Nationals, very clear sellers at this year's deadline, are my squad. I love going out to the ball game in the summertime, and it's a great way to spend time with your family and make new memories this year. You should do so with using Game Time. The Game Time app is fun with lots of great features, last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for not just sports but other major events. They have zone deals where you can save even more money choosing a section to sit in as opposed to specific seats and letting Game Time actually make the choice. Plus, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and you also get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're talking Santi Aldama being a hooper for the Spaniards over in France at the Olympics. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole, with a commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Damichael does a phenomenal job as the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. Make sure you're following him on X at Damichael C. You can follow me on X at Joe Mullinax. Damichael, we move on to guys currently playing basketball. Santi Aldama is on Team Spain at the moment. And while Team Spain, I believe, lost the game that we're going to be talking about in particular, Santi was one of the stars of the contest, scored something like 27 points, shot well from beyond the arc. There's something to be said for the differences between FIBA-style basketball and NBA basketball, right? Like the biggest difference, and I watched Team USA have a pretty solid showing against Serbia. Maybe we can talk about that tomorrow. But I watched Team USA. I watched their games, and the foul baiting, right? They're so used to trying to get these refs to make calls, and in FIBA, it doesn't happen, right? It's like Joel Embiid will flail every once in a while, and everybody just kind of looking around at each other. And then, of course, going back to the previous part of the show, another small college guard, Steph Curry, being a part of that Team USA experience. Santi Aldama in Spain really showing a lot of progress and skill in his game. We've talked a lot about Gigi Jackson versus Santi being a competition to watch for rotation minutes. If Santi plays like this, Taylor Jenkins has a really good problem on his hands, because this Santi Aldama could help the Memphis Grizzlies out a lot with that front court versatility that we talked about last week a little bit on our last episode with the Jay Huff signing. You need a big that can space the floor. This Santi Aldama looks like he can.
Here's the with Santi to me. When you look at his three-point shooting numbers, just roughly 33-34% pretty much at this point of his career. That is not what my eyes show me. my eyes show me a guy who's very capable of having a 37, 38% 3-point season. Like whether it's in practice, whether it's, again, I'm big on shot quality, right? Well, confidence. Dylan Brooks is, I know that's your guy. When I say that, you bring up Dylan Brooks. He's one of the anomalies to it. But I like to say that you can tell what type of shots guys can make based on what, their confidence level in taking them. And Santi, for a lot of his time with the Grizzlies, has been very confident in taking a lot of 3-point shots, from different spots across the court. So he can make them, because he makes them a lot in practice. I've seen it. And with that being said, I say all that just to say that I think this is a guy at some point, he's due for, I guess, I don't know if it's a progression to the mean at this point, because at this point in his career, he's been roughly just steady around 34% of his 3-point range. But I just feel like you can't tell me this guy's not due above league average 3-point shooting season. But I think league average last year was around 36%. Santi can shoot above that. I wholeheartedly believe so. And if he's able to do that, if Santi's shooting 37% from 3-point range next season, 38% from 3-point range, he's in the rotation. Simple as that. And, there's the GG factor and all that, and that'll work itself out. And however, every other player in that second, coming off the bench or whatever the case may be. But it's simple to me, Joe. If Santi's coming off the bench shooting 38%, because that's what they need him for. They need more shooters. They need more bigs who can space the floor. If he's giving you that, he's in the rotation.
Do you think there's something to the idea that Santi is doing better in FIBA because the physicality level is different? I think back to that Lakers playoff series, right? And the Santi Aldama almost got played off the floor because he was not able to deal well with the physicality and the length and the strength that the Los Angeles Lakers were bringing to those contests. FIBA, that doesn't happen as much, right? It's just a different style of basketball. It's almost like that's where his niche is. Like if he ever left the NBA, I think Nikola Mirotic is maybe the name of the guy that I'm thinking of.
There you go.
Mirotic was a solid NBA player,
really
maybe
good.
Even above average. Yeah, that's probably a good way to put it. But he chose to go back home in Europe and, do things over there. And he was like a EuroLeague MVP caliber player.
Yeah.
I feel like Santi Aldama is not as good as Mirotic, but I do see some similarities there, not just in terms of, being perimeter based or whatever the case might be, but the physicality and the athleticism in the NBA is different than what you see in FIBA, unless you're playing against the United States of America. Right. And I do think that's an important thing to point out. How much of what Santi is doing is translatable or transferable to the NBA game because the way that it's played at that level is so different.
You heard it here first, everybody. Joe Mullinax is saying that Santi Aldama should go to the EuroLeague and leave the NBA for good.
I'm saying Santi Aldama could be an all EuroLeague player if he plays this way in FIBA. But I'm asking genuinely, can this translate? Can this come to the NBA level? Can he develop his body in a way to be able to deal with that physicality?
But here's the thing, Joe. I think some people would say that FIBA basketball may be even more physical because of a point that you said earlier. The refs are going to let you play a little bit more.
The refs aren't going to reward foul baiting. I think there's a difference.
I mean, we saw Jaren, how he dealt with the physicality last year, and I don't think it was the greatest thing in the world.
Oh, that's fair.
So I mean, it's debatable. Some people say the NBA is soft for whatever reasons or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, you got a lot of strong dudes in the front court in the NBA who are able to, I get your point, expose what some of Santi's weaknesses have been up to this point, which is strength. So I think that could be a fair point to make, being that, that even in that past performance, he made 6 3-pointers for Spain, which was actually an Olympics record for Spain. I mean, that kind of caught me by surprise, considering the Sergio Llull, Rudy Fernandez, and many other guards or wings, that have come through there, in addition to the bigs, that have been able to shoot the basketball. So kudos to Santi for setting that record too. But yeah, I think there is something, to that, how he deals with physicality. But at the same time, it could be simple, Joe. It could be simple as the FIBA has a shorter 3-point line. I mean, that's one area. It could be simple as the game's just a little bit slower. And it could be as simple as he has a bigger role. He knows every night on the floor. I mean, I looked at this the other day. Did you notice he's the only current NBA player on Spain's roster? Like, that is that is just everything. That is just defying my whole childhood. Like Spain was always loaded with NBA talent, and all of a sudden he's the only one with, like right now. I mean, of course they have a couple of guys over there with NBA experience that can play in the NBA, but he's the only one currently on the NBA roster. So I think that in a way kind of gives him some, gives him a little juice, gives him a little like, hey, you're our NBA guy, like. Get us to. They're still ranked number 2 in the world rankings right now. So, I think Santi has a bigger role and all that, and I think all of those things play a factor as well as you mentioned in the physicality.
I'm excited for Santi, and I think that whether it's within the Memphis rotation, building up trade value down the road, whatever the case might be, the better Santi plays, the better it is for Memphis, for sure. Let us know what you think in the comments, how impressive you've been with Santi Aldama to this stage of the Olympics. Again, Spain struggling a little bit as a team out the gate, but no denying Santi Aldama is pretty impressive at this stage. Somebody that was pretty impressive in their time in Memphis was Tyus Jones. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, there were rumors over the weekend that the Memphis Grizzlies were in the final running to try to bring Tyus Jones back to Memphis. He chooses Phoenix. Should we feel slighted? Do we believe those reports? We'll talk about that next. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. This is our Monday edition of the show. We're going to have another good full week of programming. We'll take a look at the United States Olympics situation, how things are going over there for Team USA, kind of get a lay of the land with the NBA at large, and teams that maybe are concerning or not concerning for us at this current stage of the offseason. A team that's kind of in that tweener role, Damichael, is the Phoenix Suns, right? Kevin Durant, speaking of amazing Olympic performances, completely obliterated Serbia on Sunday. And, he obviously, alongside Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, old friend Grayson Allen, that Phoenix Suns team is very interesting, kind of top heavy. They've added some good pieces in terms of depth, and a massive addition was Tyus Jones. Now, I know you're going to tackle kind of where this fits in the Western Conference psyche of the Memphis Grizzlies. Yeah. What I'd like to talk about, partner, and obviously you can respond, there were reports over the weekend that there were 3 teams in the running for Tyus' services. I think it was Minnesota, it was Phoenix, and then the third team, surprisingly to me, was the Memphis Grizzlies. And I say surprisingly because, as you know, Damichael, I have been one of the loudest drum beaters of Tyus Jones not being that good as a reserve point guard. He struggled statistically with that his last year in Memphis. He was the best substitute teacher in the National Basketball Association. When Ja Morant was out, Tyus kept that ship afloat. He was a very good starter for this team. He was not a good, true backup point guard for this team. Nobody knows that better than Zach Kleiman. So I find it hard to believe personally that Tyus Jones was actually being considered by Memphis. It feels like a play by an agent or some other sort of group to try to get a more advantageous contract, more money somewhere, more years, whatever the case might be. It felt like a power play to me, because if the only way for me, and this is me speaking, I want to stress that it's not Damichael Cole, because I'm about to say something that's kind of wild. The only way that it would have made sense to keep Tyus Jones and sign him long-term would have been to trade Ja Morant and to get a huge package in return. I want to stress, I don't want to do that. I don't think that would be smart. I never would have done that, but I'm trying to make my point to Michael that Tyus is a starting point guard, which is what he's going to be in Phoenix. Yeah. Right. And he's going to be starting next to guys that all want to score. Tyus can impact the game. His assist to turnover ratio is literally the best in the last 50 years in the National Basketball Association. Yeah. This is a guy who's going to fit there like a glove. It scares me because I think he's going to make Phoenix a lot better, but I don't know that I believe that Memphis was actually in on him in free agency.
Yeah, I'll touch on that real quick and then switch to what you were saying at the end about how this impacts Phoenix. But as at this point, I haven't heard much on it and really haven't looked into it that much on just the Tyus Jones and Memphis thing. But in terms of what, like, if there was some truth to the report or whatever the case may be, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, quite frankly, being that I know, there's the idea that Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, all these guys can can play backup point guard minutes. But Joe, look, here's one thing. This is something that I know.
And don't forget, your boy Derrick Rose is still on the team. What do you need Tyus Jones for?
But look, I want to emphasize this because this is just me talking. This is around the team talk right here. We talk a lot about the end of the season. What happened at the beginning of the season is not lost upon the franchise. And I say that to say Marcus Smart was the starting point guard. And you remember on this show, we were talking about it. We were saying, oh, the Grizzlies could go 13-12 without Ja. Just tread water, right? They could go 12-13, 11-14 worst case, maybe even 14-11, because they were playing in what turned out to be one of the weaker tournament groups in the whole thing, in the in-season tournament. So with that being said, they started the season 0-6, 0-8, and Marcus Smart was starting point guard, and it did not look good. That is not lost up on this franchise. So I say that to say I wouldn't be surprised if they say, hey, we still need to address that area of the team, given that caliber of a player was still available at this time of free agency. But with that being said, switching tones a little bit, the Tyus Jones move is interesting to me because one area, the biggest area that Phoenix struggled in, because everybody's been saying Phoenix needs a point guard, like it was very obvious from pretty much the beginning. But they struggled a lot with turnovers, and we in Memphis know it. And they also got Monte Morris, so you basically got arguably the two best guys in the NBA at taking care of the basketball from an assist to turnover ratio standpoint. Tyus has led the league the last 6 years. He was amazing at that in Memphis. So I think that helps the Suns out tremendously in the area of taking basketball. Defensively, it doesn't help them one bit. Now you're going to need Bradley Beal and Devin Booker to really defend their butts off. They already were having to be decent defenders. Kevin Durant's going to get after it. But now you need 36-year-old Kevin Durant plus Bradley Beal and Devin Booker to guard like your Kawhi Leonard's, your Ja Morant's. Like who's guarding Ja? Is it going to be Bradley Beal? Oh, I don't even want to think about it, y'all. I don't even want to think about that. That's nasty.
Barbecue chicken
alert. But with all that being said, there's this other little interesting caveat that I'm picking up on, y'all. I don't know if anyone's noticed this yet, but Golden State has DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson. Now Tyus Jones is in Phoenix, and Dylan Brooks
with Grayson Allen.
But Dylan Brooks is in Houston. I didn't mention Grayson Allen because I'm going back specifically to the 56-win team.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
And I think it's meaningful that like almost half of the rotation from the 56-win team, Steven Adams as well. Steven Adams is in Houston. So yeah, half of the rotation from the 56-win team is on Western Conference foes who want to trump the Grizzlies this season. Like it's whether it's Houston, they want to be better than Memphis. Well, of course, Golden State, they have a limited window here with Curry and Draymond, whatever the case may be. And then now Tyus Jones going to Phoenix. So I say all that to say the Grizzlies are going to play some very meaningful games against some familiar faces. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out this year.
Seems like a good topic for another episode down the road this week on Locked On Grizzlies. We can kind of take a look at that. I think that there are two sides of the coin. In some ways, I think Zach Kleiman outsmarted himself, to be honest with you. The Anthony Melton thing, they still had him on a really team-friendly deal. They moved on from him way too early, in my opinion. We just talked about Santi Aldama on this episode. He doesn't get reps if Kyle Anderson is still here, right? So there's give and take with that maybe we can explore a little bit more in depth. But Tyus Jones makes Phoenix better, I think. They are already pretty all-in, obviously, offensively, when you could argue that, it's not an argument. Bradley Beal is your third best offensive player. That's a pretty darn good offense potentially. And now they've got a guard who doesn't need to score in Tyus to help facilitate all of that craziness. That's really going to help them. I agree that he doesn't help a ton defensively, but at least he's playing a true point guard position, and that will give him some opportunity to at least find a comfort zone there. with the Phoenix Suns. So let Damichael and I know, does that move the needle for you? Let us know in the comments. Are you nervous, more nervous about Phoenix now? Do you believe this stuff about Memphis being interested? Because like I said, Tyus wants to be a starter. Right, that's what Tyus Jones wants. That's not happening in Memphis. So, I don't believe it. I don't think that actually is true. But maybe we'll have some more information on that later on this week here on Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you guys so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Don't forget about Locked On Sports Today. Make that your second listen, your second watch. Check it out over on YouTube as well as on Amazon Fire TV under the free TV channels app. It is 24/7 Locked On Podcast Network content from our league channels, as well as our individual team channels, all sorts of great hosts across the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today after this episode concludes. As I mentioned a moment ago, check back in on the Olympics. That's the major sport happening in the world right now, not just in America. We'll also kind of revisit this Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson. I think Damichael's onto something there. Might be some smoke to the fire. What kind of impact that might play, the ghosts of Grizzlies past perhaps haunting Memphis in the next several months to come. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Make sure you're making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen, your first watch each and every day. Make sure you are following every single episode that we drop and checking it out and continuing to give us good feedback on how we can continue to make Locked On Grizzlies better. For Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. We will catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies. Again, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts, we're free and available, and we'll be back here tomorrow. See ya.